Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start with Turkey, which says 33 of its soldiers were killed by a Syrian airstrike in northwestern Idlib province. The governor of Hatay province, Rahmi Dogan, says 32 others were wounded in the attack. The losses mark the highest number of fatalities suffered by Turkey in a single day since tensions escalated between Damascus and Ankara last month. This report has more details.
Tensions in Syria have been high since Turkish and Syrian forces came to blows in Idlib province, leading to hundreds of casualties. In the small hours of Friday, Turkey suffered the biggest blow yet to its campaign to secure its safe zone. As a result of the airstrikes, 33 soldiers are martyred. None of our wounded soldiers who are being treated in hospital are in critical condition. May our martyrs rest in peace. Our speedy recovery for our wounded soldiers. In retaliation, Turkey bombed every known Syrian military target after a 6-hour-long emergency meeting chaired by President Tayyip Erdogan. Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu spoke to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg over the assault. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has repeated his call for an immediate ceasefire in the region. Idlib is the last opposition-held stronghold in the country and home to 4 million civilians.
Syria says Israeli forces have killed a civilian and wounded 3 soldiers in an air attack near the annexed Golan Heights. State media says Israeli missiles targeted army positions at Qahtaniya, Al-Hurriyat and the town of Quneitra. Quneitra Governor Humam Dabiat confirmed the death of the civilian. Dabiat identified the dead man as Adil Tawil and said he worked at a police station. There was no immediate comment from the Israeli military. The Israeli attack comes after a Syrian linked to the Lebanese Hezbollah was killed in a cross-border drone strike yesterday. Israel has approved the construction of nearly 1,800 illegal settler homes in the occupied West Bank. In a statement, Israel's Defense Minister Naftali Bennett said Tel Aviv will not give an inch of land to the Arabs. Anti-settlement NGO Peace Now says a total of 1,739 homes have been earmarked, most of which are deep inside the West Bank. It said 1,036 have been given first stage approval, while 703 have received final stage approval. The approval of these units comes 4 days ahead of a general election in Israel. The announcement also marks the latest in a recent string of promises by Israeli officials to expand the settlements, which are illegal under international law. 22 Republican lawmakers have expressed serious concern about the anticipated U.S.-Taliban peace deal. In a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Congress members said the deal will jeopardize American national security interests. The Congress members, led by Liz Cheney, sought assurances that the Trump administration will not place American security at Taliban's hands. The lawmakers said U.S. troops withdrawal from Afghanistan will enable terrorist groups to grow stronger and establish safe havens. The letter said any promises made by the Taliban related to counter-terrorism cannot be trusted. The Congress members asked Pompeo to ensure no intelligence is shared with the fighters. The U.S. and Taliban are expected to ink the years-long negotiated peace deal tomorrow. For more on this, we have with us Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who is currently in Doha to attend signing ceremony between the US and Taliban on the invitation of Qatari government. Thank you for joining us. Now, Mr. Qureshi, with the historic first step towards peace in the war-torn country now just hours away, how significant has Pakistan's role been in helping the warring sides arrive at this point?
Well, it wouldn't have happened without Pakistan's support and facilitation. And this is being recognized by everyone here. I'm in Doha. People are arriving, delegates are arriving. Approximately 50 countries will be represented, and there'll be a number of foreign ministers participating in the ceremony, signing ceremony tomorrow. Pakistan is being discussed and I'm glad to share with you, is being discussed positively by the international community. The international press is here. People from all over the world have converged in Doha, and they find this to be a significantly important event that is about to happen, and Pakistan's role is central to it.
Stakeholders are arriving in Doha for the peace deal. During the 7-day token ceasefire deal, there have been incidents of violence which the Taliban have distanced themselves from. How much do the US and the Taliban trust each other to not let such incidents sabotage the progress of the peace process?
You have to acknowledge the fact that there were elements, and there are elements who do not want this agreement to go ahead. And they have tried to play the role of spoilers. Pakistan has been pointing it out throughout that there are spoilers. There are spoilers within Afghanistan, and there are spoilers in the region who do not want to see this agreement move ahead. But the good thing is that the important players of the region, important countries like Russia, like China, like the European Union, the United States, and other important players have endorsed this and are supporting this peace process. So we have to be vigilant of the spoilers. There are elements over there who would not want this to happen, but the overwhelming majority, I think, feels that this is a right step at the right time.
Mr. Qureshi, you rightfully said that Pakistan is being discussed positively for its role as a facilitator in the Afghan peace process for an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution. Does Pakistan's role end with the signing of the peace deal tomorrow?
You see, this now the responsibility has to shift towards Afghans. Hopefully, once the agreement is signed, there will be an environment created for an intra-Afghan dialogue. Now, that dialogue is amongst Afghans. Pakistan has no role in it. They have to sit and decide what kind of Afghanistan do they want, what kind of a political dispensation is good for them, they are comfortable with, how inclusive do they want to be, how do they sit together and chart out a way forward for peace and stability in Afghanistan. It's primarily their role. Pakistan will be supportive, because Pakistan supports the peace process. Pakistan is supportive of reconciliation. Pakistan has been consistently supporting and advocating an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process.
Mr. Qureshi, as we have the opportunity to talk to you about regional stability, let's now talk about India. With 38 Muslims killed in recent riots and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government overseeing a mass targeting of Muslims, India intends to render hundreds of thousands of Muslims stateless and has been very vocal in telling them to shift to Pakistan. If it comes to that, is Pakistan ready for any such mass migration?
Well, to begin with, what the world is seeing is horrific. The world is seeing how a secular democracy, the so-called secular democracy, has been overtaken by a Hindutva mindset. And not just the world, there are many within India who are scared of this transition taking place, and they are agitating, they are protesting. The opposition is, and many factions and minorities besides Muslims. Muslims are complaining. They are complaining because of the discriminatory nature of the Citizen Amendment Act. But do you think the Christians are secure? Do you think the Dalits, who are a lower caste, a Hindu caste, are they happy? Do you think the Sikhs are comfortable? Not at all. Jains, Buddhists, others? No. There is a huge voice today in India which is very unhappy with the policies that are being pursued by the present regime in Delhi. People are complaining. Major opposition leaders are even being critical of the role the Supreme Court is playing. For example, a judge who takes cognizance of police officers who were sort of overlooking what was going on in Delhi, in fact were facilitating and supporting people who were committing arson and torture over there. And that very judge has been transferred from Delhi to Haryana. Now, what kind of a justice is that going to be? Where will people go for justice? Now, who am I to say that? Indian leadership, prominent names in India are tweeting about it, are complaining about it. So that is the shift that has taken place, and the world has taken notice. Writers, singers, actors, Foreign Relations Committee members of the U.S. Congress are complaining about it. Members of Parliament in the House of Commons, the European parliamentarians, members of the European Parliament have been talking about it. Human Rights Council in Geneva is discussing these issues, human rights violations.
We were in conversation with Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi about regional stability. Thank you for talking to Indus News. Now going to India, where the death toll and end riots during the anti-citizenship law protest in the capital New Delhi has risen to 42. Hindu radicals targeted 4 mosques, 79 Muslim houses, 52 shops, 2 schools and 3 factories owned by Muslims. Fire service officials say over 500 cars, trucks and buses were destroyed by the radicals. The US, France and Russia have issued security alert for their citizens in India due to growing incidents of mob violence by Hindu extremists. In their separate statements, the US and Russian embassies in Delhi cautioned their citizens against traveling in the country. Washington has also called on all sides to refrain from violence and to maintain peace in the country. Protests broke out in Delhi after the ruling BJP government enacted the Citizenship Amendment Act, rendering millions of Muslims potentially stateless. The US has urged India to respect the right to peaceful assembly. The top US diplomat for South Asia, Alice Wells, called on all sides to refrain from violence. The Democratic frontrunner Bernie Sanders has denounced President Donald Trump's response to the anti-Muslim mob violence in India. The US Commission on International Religious Freedom has also criticized the Indian response, voicing alarm at reports of police inaction. India has seen mass protests after Modi's Hindu nationalist government pushed forward a controversial citizenship law. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. In China, another 44 people have lost their lives to the new coronavirus in the last 24 hours, bringing the death toll to 2,788. Hopes to contain the virus are diminishing as the first case in sub-Saharan Africa was reported in Nigeria. More in this report.
The coronavirus scare has gripped the world as new confirmed cases of the disease reported in regions outside China continue to rise. The World Health Organization says it is alarmed at the new figures and has urged countries to prepare themselves against the spread of the disease.
The increase in the rest of the world, we will see more cases, is a bad news. And especially in 3 countries, we're seeing clusters in Iran, in Italy, and also in Korea.
Afghanistan and Pakistan face a potential health crisis after the new coronavirus erupted in neighboring Iran. Pakistan closed its border with Iran after 2 individuals returning from the country were found to be infected. But people continue to cross between Afghanistan and Iran after the border was reopened following a temporary closure.
We have come from Tehran. As soon as we heard that the borders have been opened, we were happy. Doctors are checking travelers on the Iran and Afghanistan borders, and if the borders were not opened, we would be in trouble.
The fatal virus has now spread to 45 countries, infecting over 82,000 people. The outbreak in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia have fanned fears of poor countries without the healthcare infrastructure to cope with the challenges.
Iran says its death toll from coronavirus has risen to 26 with 245 cases, including several senior officials. The Vice President for Women and Family Affairs, Masoumeh Eftekhar, and Deputy Health Minister Iraj Harishi have also been infected. Officials say Eftekhar's case is mild and she has not been hospitalized. A lawmaker, Mahmoud Sadeghi, has also tested positive for coronavirus. The outbreak prompted authorities to call off Friday prayers in several cities, including Tehran. State media said Tehran has banned Chinese nationals from entering the country. The death rate among confirmed cases of the virus has been higher in Iran than elsewhere. The coronavirus is spreading more quickly in Europe and other parts of the world than in China. The disease was detected for the first time in Estonia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Greece. Greece has reported 2 new cases in the past 24 hours, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to 3. In Switzerland, the number of confirmed coronavirus cases has risen to 4. Meanwhile, France has cancelled a big finale of a carnival in Nice that borders northern Italy over coronavirus fears. The carnival in the southern city started on 15th February and was set for the finale on Saturday. France is on high alert and has so far confirmed 2 deaths and 18 infections due to the virus in the country. Moving on, Democratic presidential candidates have held rallies across South Carolina ahead of Saturday's primary. Racial justice and healthcare took center stage as candidates tried to woo the African American vote that dominates the state. More in this report.
The race for Democratic presidential nomination is gathering momentum as it enters its first decisive stretch. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders secured a critical victory in Nevada, but rivals warn his nomination could ensure U.S. President Donald Trump's re-election. Saturday's South Carolina primary is being dubbed as the first big test for early frontrunner Sanders. Sanders shelled out his message of unity and inclusiveness at a spirited campaign rally in Wofford College.
We are building a movement that cannot be stopped. It is a justice movement. It is a movement for economic justice, for social justice, for racial justice, for environmental justice. And when millions of people stand up and fight back, nothing on earth can stop us.
At a campaign rally at the Coastal Carolina University, former Vice President Joe Biden said he was the best candidate to take on Trump.
They spent $125,000 putting up ads that are flat lies to keep me from getting the nomination. I wonder why. Because if I get the nomination, I will beat him like a drum.
Leading the pre-poll service for South Carolina by a considerable margin now, Biden will hope the African-American vote will help to resurrect his stuttering White House bid on Saturday.
Dominicans have staged fresh protests in Santo Domingo after municipal elections were suspended earlier this month. The Republic's Electoral Institute suspended a nationwide election 4 hours after voting began on February 16th. The government says failure of half of the automated voting machines forced the suspension. An Organization of American States investigation backed the government's claim, saying the voting machines were not manipulated. Protesters are now calling for officials at the Electoral Institute to resign and for an investigation.
We want to know what happened with the suspension of municipal elections. We want answers. Young people are 40% of the voters this year, and we deserve justice, as we have demanded in recent days.
The U.S. says it will never recognize Russian claims of sovereignty over Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. In a statement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said February 27th marked the 6th anniversary of Russia's annexation of Crimean Peninsula. He said the Russian occupation authorities continue to violate human rights and fundamental freedoms. Pompeo said the increasing militarization of the peninsula is a threat to common security. Moscow and Kiev have been at loggerheads since Russia annexed Crimea after a controversial referendum. Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, has urged the Security Council not to bury the Astana process. At the UNSC session, Germany, France and other countries urged Russia and Turkey to start talks in order to stop an escalation in Syria's Idlib. Nebenzia said Russia is working with the Syrian government to settle existing difficulties. He said the UN Security Council should not build up political pressure. Estonia's UN ambassador Savan Jurgensen disagreed with Moscow, saying the Astana format has failed. US Ambassador Kelly Croft also accused Russia and Iran of making the situation worse in Syria. The situation in Idlib escalated again early this month after fresh attacks by government and military forces. Greece is tightening its border controls on land and at sea to address the flow of migrants and take tougher measures against the new coronavirus. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis says border controls will be increased in accordance with international law. Mitsotakis said he has ordered a significant increase in the number of boats and patrols around the islands in the eastern Aegean Sea. The government's plan to construct new camps at the islands of Lesbos and Chios to relieve overcrowding in existing facilities sparked protests. Over 1 million refugees and migrants have reached Greece since 2015, mainly coming from the Turkish mainland. Athens currently hosts over 42,000 migrants on its islands. The World Bank has restored relations with Somalia after a 30-year break, paving way for the country to have access to low-cost development aid. Contact was severed in 1991 as the country descended into conflict, facing violence from militant groups. World Bank Vice President for Africa, Hafez Ghanem, said Somalia has made important reforms to drive the economy forward. Somalia has won initial approval from World Bank and IMF to get hundreds of millions in debt relief. Somalia's Finance Minister Abdirahman Bailey said the approval is a recognition of the government's efforts to improve country's economic situation. Almost 70% of Somalis live on less than $2 a day. European markets have dipped, with major bourses on course for their biggest weekly decline since the financial crisis in 2008 amid pandemic fears. Investors are panic selling over fear the rapid spread of the coronavirus outside China could trigger a global recession. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 4% lower. London's FTSE 100 has nosedived over 3.5% after the UK threatened to walk away from trade negotiations if significant progress is not made by June. CAC 40 in Paris has lost over 3.5% as number of coronavirus cases rise in France. In Asia, Shanghai Composite led the losses, closing over 3.5% lower. Nikkei 225 lost over 3.5%, while Seoul's Kospi traded over 3% lower. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil prices have plunged nearly 2.5%, while WTI crude has lost nearly 3%, recording a 12-month low. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.